back to, oh, I'll only have a couple of whiskeys and this and that. And that resulted in me just always kind of drinking through the medication. But then I would rationalize and think, well, even though I'm still drinking somewhat heavily, I am taking the meds, so I am, there must be some progress taking place, but it's really not totally how it works. Is I don't know, as you know, I mean, I'm on the Sinclair Warriors, webpage, and I see people pop in and they're like a total wreck, and I'm like, God, this guy's a disaster, or this poor woman, and then 4 months later, they're like, I just went 12 days without drinking. I kind of think like, wow, that's crazy because I don't really do alcohol-free days, but I mean, I'm a thousand times happier. I told you this before. I don't think I'd be married today if it wasn't really for this, this method. So,
Welcome, everybody. It's Katie Lane with Thrive Alcohol Recovery. And today I have a special guest with me. Today I have with me Jason, who is a Sinclair Method success story. And I always love sharing people's testimonies and personal experiences with the Sinclair Method because everyone's experience is different and varied, and people take different lengths of time to respond to naltrexone. And I think Jason's story isn't going to be an exception to that. He definitely has a unique Sinclair Method story to tell. So just want to start off by thanking you so much for taking time to chat with me today.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, why don't we just start at the beginning, Jason? Can you start by telling us a little bit about your history with alcohol and what kind of led you to the Sinclair Method in the first place?
Sure. I'm 59, and when I was 14, we had the opportunity to move to England, and so my dad took it. So we moved over to England, but uh, nobody knew that they don't care how old you are to drink over there, pretty much. So I went from biking and riding skateboards and hanging out at the community pool to hanging out at pubs and going downtown to London at like 14, just doing a lot of partying. But I went to a very strict school as well, so I got a good education. Which anyway, that's kind of how it started. But
So then you started drinking obviously at a very young age. What happened as you progressed into adulthood? Did you ever dial it back or did it get worse? Can you tell us a bit about what your drinking was like as you got older and before TSM?
my drug of choice became pot, pretty much. So I was a pothead for a long time and did not drink really much at all. Um, so probably maybe I mean, it slowed down in college, but then started picking up probably towards my mid to when I went to grad school, mid to late 20s. I started again. It was just mostly pot, but probably when I quit smoking, I really that's when things really just began to get bad, and that was probably about 18, 20 years ago.
So what did your drinking look like before like right before you started the Sinclair Method? Can you kind of tell us what your pattern was? Just because I know people out there have different drinking styles and frequencies, so people can understand like your story and what your pattern was like before TSM.
um, I mean, I was just a terrible drunk. I mean, I don't day drink. I would never drink, and I never drank during work or anything. Never in the morning. But as soon as I would get off work, I was, if I needed to go to the liquor store, I'd go to the liquor store, get my 1.75 liter of Jack Daniels or vodka, and even like two or three minis to slam on the way home. I was pretty pathetic. I remember I had to take my car in and had an issue with the air conditioning. It was under, they said, oh, it's under recall, blah, blah, blah. You wants to take it now? And I was like, yeah, sure, forgetting that I had like probably 30 empty mini bottles sitting in my center console. So, which were in a cardboard box when I picked it up.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that's one of those. I've had moments like that too. I had it stashed under my seat, so I relate to that. But those are those painful moments you don't forget.
And so I would get home and immediately make a drink, I mean, before I was just like my parents. I mean, you couldn't talk to them until, dad had had a martini or two. And So I was the same way, but I'd drink probably, I would finish most of a 1.75 liter. I don't care what it was, every night.
So how did you know that it was getting out of hand, or what prompted you to start the Sinclair method?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I had a bad habit, really, and not habit, but I mean, I knew I was addicted to alcohol, and I knew AA wasn't going to be for me. I'm not religious at all. I wasn't interested in, and I knew I couldn't just quit. I just knew deep down inside I could not do that. Um, and I knew I was drinking too much to be able to quit anyway. So my options were to check myself into rehab or do something like that. But I mean, I was blacking out every night. Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and my wife would be ignoring me, and I'd try to remember if we had a fight the night before, and just horrible things like that, and scaring my kids. Not never violent or anything, but just you know, stomping around, slamming doors. Late night arguments. My wife doesn't really drink, so for her to have to deal with me at like 10 o'clock at night, just after five martinis, big ones too. I mean, I'm not talking small glasses here.
Yeah, that must have been really hard in the family dynamic. Alcohol always makes things difficult in that way. Um, so had you tried
And,
other things before the
and
Sinclair method? I know you said you knew AA wasn't for you, but were you trying other ways to cut back, or was that just not on the table?
no, no. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've had moments where I woke up so hungover that I'd go pour the rest of a bottle of vodka out, and say, okay, now I'm going to quit, and then you're back at the liquor store at 5:30, because like the way to fix your hangover is to have a few drinks. So, but back to your question, so I kind of realized about 3.5 years ago, and um, my name, so you can kind of see where I posted out on the Sinclair Method the first time that, I mean, I just came into work one day, and I'm a business owner. I own my own business, and I just told my mechanic, I was like, I got to get my shit together, man. I'm an alcoholic, and so I just started looking around for cures for alcoholism online, and that morning, found TED Talk, Claudia's TED Talk, and watched it. And I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing if it's true. And then, printed out the little printout the Sinclair method and made an appointment with my doctor and went in and said, I'm an alcoholic. I need help, And he was kind of like, well, pretty big to admit it, blah, 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 sort of thing. And I said, here's what I want to try, Naltrexone. He'd heard of it. Um, and he was very accepting and said, yeah, sure, let's give it a shot. So,
That's great that your doctor was on board and willing to try it out with you. So let's talk about, because I know a little bit about your story, and I know that you weren't, the typical fast responder who had like the perfect Sinclair method journey, which I think most people don't. But, people may see your story and think, man, he took a while to reach, the end goal of extinction, or to really like reach the end goal for why was doing the method. So can you talk to us a little bit about what this journey has been like for you? When you started it, how long you've been on the Sinclair method, and just in general, your experience with it so far?
sure. I mean, just to be upfront, I mean, I still drink wine. So I pretty much will drink a bottle of wine per night. I am 200 pounds. It's not like I'm a small person, but so people are like, oh, wow, it's a lot, but believe me, it's a far cry from what I used to drink, and I'm very, very happy for that. But yes, I've been doing it over 3 years. I don't know exactly. I'm not. I don't track drinks. I never really got into that. I just kind of went by my gut feel. I knew I was drinking a lot less, but I went through phases probably that a lot of people go through, and it's I'm always kind of this stubborn person who thinks I don't need to like totally quit hard alcohol. I can kind of manage, and and so I was trying to do it and still trying to drink hard liquor at the same time. And I think initially, then I kind of cut that out, and then I went back to maybe a year and a half ago of back to, oh, I'll only have a couple of whiskeys and this and that resulted in me just always kind of drinking through the medication. but then I would rationalize and think, well, even though I'm still drinking somewhat heavily, I am taking the meds, so I am, there must be some progress taking place, but it's really not totally how it works. Is I don't know, as you know, I mean, I'm on the Sinclair Warriors, webpage, and I see people pop in and they're like a total wreck, and I'm like, God, this guy's a disaster, or this poor woman, and then 4 months later, they're like, I just went 12 days without drinking. And I kind of think like, wow, that's crazy because I don't really do alcohol-free days, but I mean, I'm 1,000 times happier. I told you this before. I don't think I'd be married today if it wasn't really for this, this method. So,
Yeah, and that's just incredible. And, the Sinclair method is a harm reduction treatment protocol. So for most people, abstinence isn't the end goal. It's about getting to a, safer relationship with alcohol or a healthier relationship with alcohol. And so, um, I was curious to hear, like, you talked about the drinking on the hard alcohol and how you would drink through the medicine. Can you talk about what that experience feels like, maybe in contrast to what your experience is like now for people who may not understand what that means to drink through the naltrexone medication?
um, well, I mean, it's a very hard, you know, drug to define. I don't have side effects or anything when I take it, so and again, I kind of look at what some people say, and it's like alcohol doesn't taste any different to me. It doesn't, it's not, it doesn't deter me in that effect. I just don't, I know I'm not getting the reward. But drinking through it was just always about, yeah, I just wanted to feel the buzz, and so, I would still, I mean, part of why I would drink would be to help me pass out, and not pass out necessarily, but sleep better, and of course it really doesn't, um, but I would just again it was the just hard liquor, two three drinks instead of five or six, and I could still catch a buzz, and it's very different when you just kind of drink wine. I mean, the thing that I notice about myself is like I can go to a party or a wedding or something like that, and I won't, I'm not the guy who's like, come on, let's do a shot, da da da, that sort of thing. And I always used to be pretty much that person, or even running into some of my old friends. My wife will say, hey, we're going out to dinner, but what if you run into Randy? Because he'll be out tonight. And I'm like, I'm fine to drive. I mean, I'm gonna have my one drink. That's it. I'm not. I don't fall under pressure anymore of like, hey, let's have a shot, da da da. Next thing you're on your sixth shot. I mean, I'm not. Um,
So do you
it's
attribute that
I'm
to
kind
the
of
naltrexone?
babble because
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's
Sorry.
I kind of babble because it's really impossible to kind of define, you know, express how you really how you feel. I just feel totally different, about alcohol. And like I told you, I still have hard booze in the house, and I've a you know good bottle of rum I picked up in Bonaire last year, over a year and a half ago, and it's I had a little sip of it the other night, but I mean, I was doing things like when I got back into drinking whiskey on now, I was making Manhattans or whatever, and then so I'd have a collection of whiskey, but I knew at the same time my wife wouldn't be able to track how much I was drinking because it's not one bottle. And not that she was really doing that, but that's subconsciously why I was doing some of this nutty stuff, and you know.
I appreciate you sharing that because I think even with naltrexone, when people are taking it correctly, there's things that we can do to kind of fight the medication or trick the medication or still kind of, you know, drink how we want to drink, even if we're taking the medication correctly. And that can be a challenge and something that isn't necessarily addressed overnight. It can take time to fix that. So I was just curious to hear, like, how did you transition from the place of being, someone drinking the hard alcohol, drinking, lots of different kinds, so you couldn't really keep track to someone now who has this sense of regained control where you go out and you have a drink or you're not tempted to take all the shots anymore? Like, how did you go from one to the other?
Well, I mean, what did help me was I did go to 75 milligrams again after partying last January where I, got together with a friend and, we ended up doing, 15 shots of tequila or something. And I was really ugly to my wife when I got home and we had a terrible fight and stuff. So I upped it to 75. And definitely I said that's it. I'm not going to do the hard alcohol, and so I stuck to wine and stuff, and it's helped substantially. I mean, I've never been a morning person. I'm up, every morning at like 7 now, 2 hours before I need to be into work and stuff. And I get in early and get a lot of stuff done, and um, so I mean, getting up early and it gets me to bed earlier too as well. So it's less, sort of time to drink, I guess. But it's everything in combination. No matter how you lessen it helps, because you eventually kind of get to the point where it's it's never, I mean, it's not on your mind. You know what I mean? I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, you're an old veteran, so you're not old.
Well, and it's hard to describe when someone hasn't experienced it yet. Like, what's it like to drink on naltrexone? How does it change your experience with alcohol? It is hard to put into words because there's nothing else out there like it. Do you say would you say that you have like just a sense of regained control over alcohol that you didn't have before?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd like to have a little bit more control and be able to do, a string of alcohol-free days, but it's still part of my sort of relaxation ritual at the end of the day. And um, I mean, I am, very busy. I run a business pretty much by myself right now that's doing really well, and it just takes a lot of time. So at the end of the day, I do like to, sit down, put on a movie, and have a glass of wine. So I don't, it's hard for me to really. That's the only thing I'm really missing is, I'd like to be able just to do, alcohol-free days. But there are several days when I just have like one glass, like, you know, six ounces, and I'm done. But
And that's
yeah,
huge. And I think there's a lot of
I feel
people. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
I feel like I have control. I'm never going back to the way I was, and my doctor understands, and my everybody understands. It's like I'll always be taking naltrexone, and I'm fine with that. It's not there's no long-term effects from it, and my doctor fills my prescription every time, so I feel like I'm pretty lucky. I mean, I will say that for the people who are starting, if you don't have a doctor that's going to give you good support, or is questioning what you're doing, I would find another doctor, for sure. I mean, I see some people going online. I don't think I'd order something like this online, from India or anything, or but you need support. You need whether it's your, I mean, especially from your family. My kid told me, that on her own, she just told me one day, I noticed you drink a lot less, and that's great, and I think I told you she got me tickets to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal, and we went there, and I brought one small little bottle of wine and left it in the hotel room and went through the whole night with her and never had a single drink. And Halloween Horror Nights at Universal is like a booze fest. I mean, yeah, I have control.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's just yeah, the life-changing effects of it without requiring abstinence, because as we know, mainstream treatment and so many treatments require that as the end goal for people. And your life can be changed and so much can be improved upon by just reducing how much you're drinking. And that's huge reason why I love the Sinclair method. It doesn't force these goals on people that they don't have. If I started the Sinclair method and someone told me, "Oh, you have to have an end goal of abstinence," I don't think I would have done as well. Like I am alcohol free now, but it took me a year to get there, to get in the frame of mind to have enough extinction sessions to do it. And I still have the option to drink. But your story is just, an example of that no, you're not abstinent, but look at all the million and one ways your life has improved on all levels. It's just really encouraging to hear.
You know, my 12-year-old was diagnosed with ADHD, and part of going through that, I kind of realized, well, I definitely had it too, or still have it, But at 59, I'm not going to find out or dig down deep inside of me and figure out why I started drinking in the first place and then fix that issue. I mean, nobody touched me when I was a kid or anything like that. And I accept that. So I don't do therapy. I've done a little bit, but again, I mean, I know how I felt as a kid. I just had terrible, low self-esteem and just, adjustment issues coming back from England when I was 18 and stuff, and being thrown into a different culture, really. I mean, I was only gone 4 years, but it had an effect, and a lot of, I was really, really skinny. I mean, I was always 6'4" since like 13, but 145, 150 pounds, really, really thin. You know, I mean, I had my issues. It's just, there's going to be no moment where all of a sudden I feel like I'm just, oh my God, I completely, fully love myself, da da da. Therefore, I will never crave alcohol. I don't, I'm always, just because of who I am, because probably the nature of my ADHD, I'm always going to probably look for, just some little, you know, something to help. And for my mom, it was like Xanax or whatever. I don't, naltrexone was really pretty much the only prescription medicine I take, you know. So
Yeah. I want to go back real quick to your comment because you've been on the method for over 3 years and you still don't really have alcohol free days. Some people might view that as lack of success, or for me personally, I know a number of people who are 2+ years into this and hardly having any alcohol free days. And maybe it's not even a goal that they have right now because their drinking has decreased so much and they're satisfied with where it's at, and maybe something toward the future they'll work on. So I was just wondering, is that something you would want to speak more about, like your perspective on alcohol-free days and, whether you feel like, that's something that's necessary to have success, at least at this point on your Sinclair Method journey? I heard you say, maybe something toward the future, but how do you feel about your progress where you're at today with TSM 3+ years in?
I don't feel like I'm 100%. Where I want to be. Again, I'd like to, you know, do some alcohol-free days, but I'm so happy at this point that it's not that important to me. I mean, just to give put in perspective, I can hold this glass up, whereas before it would be doing this because I had the tremors all the time. You know, so I'm 95% where I want to be, and I'm happy. And I know as time goes on, I mean, the desire still lessens and lessens. It gets, it has less control over you. Probably the next thing I'm going to do is probably just, pick up some non-alcohol beers, and kind of go down that route. I just dropped 40 pounds since July, and that's, you know, um, that wasn't super easy. But again, I'm not drinking a ton. I'm not ingesting a ton of like empty calories, and so that's helped. But um, it's like I said, 95%, and I'm happy as hell. So
Yeah. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you because I know you mentioned earlier about like what made you stop the hard alcohol that night where you had too many tequila shots and the argument with your wife. A common question and challenge people have is trying to get their family members on board with the Sinclair method because it's not a perfect journey. People are still drinking, they can still overdrink. So, what was your experience like getting your family on board? And would you have any tips, guidance, or insight to share with people who maybe whose family members are not super keen at the idea of someone doing TSM?
I mean, my wife, she told me when we had that big fight, and we don't have fights very often, but I can guarantee you that I'm the cause of all of them 100%. Um, but she told me that night that she didn't think it was really working, and and I mean, it's you have to you go to a party, your wife's driving, there's your buddy Sarah, and you've already had your history of doing shots together. You just got can't walk over and just start doing it. You just stick to your wine. It's not hard. It's like when I was at Universal. I did not have a desire to drink. It wasn't like I had to hold back the cravings because my kid was there. My kid wouldn't have cared if I had a drink. I just. And so, you get if you me personally, I'm not an angry drunk, but there was a little thing that blew out of control that night, and these little things don't blow out of control, with me, unless I've had like 10, 12 shots of tequila, and that's, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tricky, because oftentimes when people struggle with alcohol, family members have been hurt, they've seen a lot, so it does take, perseverance and patience with the method. Does your wife see now? I know you mentioned your kid noticed that you're drinking less. What does your wife say about the progress you've seen over the years?
well, I mean, we don't talk about it too much, really. Um, I don't talk about it a lot with her because I kind of feel like it's almost like, look at me, look how I'm doing, da da da. I mean, I crave enough attention as it is, really. But because what do you expect from somebody? Yeah, you're doing great. What do you want me to say? You know what I mean? I know I'm doing really well because I'm the person who was drinking the booze. You know, I know every morning. I'd come out there and I'd look at like that bottle of Jack and I'd be like, good God, there's only like a quarter of it left. I did some damage last night. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of liquor to drink. I don't even know how many shots are in a 1.75, but just so going to one bottle of wine, from literally a bottle and a half of wine of Jack Daniels, and I know there's a huge difference, and everybody's much happier, but we don't. It's not really discussed that much. It's really not.
That's good.
My
I
kid
mean, I think
again, she said, yeah, she just said on her own a couple of times. I noticed you're drinking a lot less. I think it's great, and I'm really proud of you. And that's
yeah, I think when your drinking isn't talked about, that's probably a good sign, right? Because there's not fights or complaints or things. That's great.
I wake up every morning now. One, I'm not hungover. And two, I can tell you what I ate for dinner last night, no problem. And I can tell you if I had an argument with anybody and what I watched when I fell asleep in bed. I mean, I can never do that before, and I know it sounds silly, but when you wake up every morning and it's kind of like a mystery as to what went on, it's never good. But
Oh, that's the worst feeling. I completely relate with that. Um, I was curious to hear, in general, are there things that you would say were particularly difficult about the Sinclair method for you?
um, no, I mean, I think initially, initially I would carry around the little pill carrier, so if it's 5 o'clock at work, I take my pills, and then when I get home at 6, I can have a drink, So there's that you go through, which is just part of getting started. But I've never had a side effect. Um, I don't work out a lot, so there's never really, you know, taking it and then working out afterwards. So there's nothing. I can't really think of anything negative. I mean, I think, I mean, 3 years ago, things were a lot different. I mean, it's now there's some more recognition to the program, and stuff like you're doing is awesome, because I think if people come into something with a little bit more info and a little bit more guidance, it makes it a little less scary and a little bit more approachable. The Sinclair Method, Sinclair Warrior page is awesome for support. The people are wonderful out there. So, good support helps. It's very, very scary, to get started, because you have no idea what to expect at all. And with me, it's kind of like, I don't know why, because like I told you, I see all these people quit drinking who join the page after me, and then they disappear. You come back in a couple of years, say, hey, I'm still here, da da da, alcohol free, it's great.
Yeah.
Um, but I've always kind of wondered, like, why am I maybe a little bit different? But I consider one of the 22% it didn't work for at all. Like I was saying, my goal when I started was, I don't know, to get help. But then as I got into it, it was never really to stop drinking, and then which was your initial goal, and then it just kind of fell into place. So I mean, I don't know where I'm going to be, a year 4 or 5. I don't. Hopefully, I'm not going to, be back to where I was 3 years ago. I mean, I don't ever want to go back there at all. But because I haven't completely quit. I mean, there's 22% I don't think that this method works at all for. And that's people who, and occasionally I think we see those come into the group, on the Facebook page, and it's tough to see. Because for me, there's nothing else. I mean, you know.
Yeah. And what I think is so interesting too about your story, and why I wanted to share your story more, is that it's not the maybe typical story about the Sinclair method that we perhaps put on a pedestal or idolize, where it's, maybe more like my typical story where in 9 months I reached extinction and at a year I quit drinking. There's a lot of people out there, and I know this now as a coach the last 5 years and seeing people in our program. There's a lot of people like you who have seen incredible progress on the Sinclair method, but it doesn't mean you're abstinent. It doesn't mean you're not really drinking anymore. It's a form of reduction in your drinking to where, you're happy with it. It's not causing harm in your life anymore. And yes, maybe it will continue to evolve and change over time, but like you said, you don't want to go back to where you were. You've made just incredible progress. And so, stories like yours, I think sometimes when people are in that place, they might feel discouraged because, they're like, oh, my journey doesn't look like that person's over there. Or, I'm 3 years on this method and I'm still drinking more than I should be. So I'm interested in your story too, for that reason, because it's not the typical, Sinclair method experience. And I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate to your story.
Yeah, I mean, my situation is just, it's odd in that I was never a day drinker. As much as I would pound alcohol at night. I mean, 6 to 10 was my drinking window, 4 hours a day. It was just kind of, so I don't know. Maybe I don't know why I don't respond like some other people, but I've noticed like I said, I've noticed a huge change in my drinking in my whole life, because just looking around me right now, that you can't see is that, this my office area was a disaster up until, recently. And I was going through, mail I hadn't opened in 4 years. So I mean, my life, was a mess. I mean, and all this was really just trying to exist on the amount of alcohol I was drinking. So,
Yeah, it's such a ripple effect in a negative way when we drink too much, and then the same is true when we reduce it. It just has a positive ripple effect for us as well. Um, I was curious to hear, like, outside of kind of getting rid of the hard alcohol for the most part, what other things did you do besides take naltrexone that, was helpful for you on this journey? Or what did you notice helped you, continue to reduce your drinking through TSM?
um, it's, I don't think that I've really done anything specific to just gradually cut back. And again, I don't track or anything like that at all. But I think you got to be. It's like everything else in life. If you're going through a rough phase, you're having a rough time, you're going to lean more towards alcohol. I mean, I built my business for 11 years, and the first five were really hard. And so there's a lot of stress. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was going on. That's my business now. My daughter works there. My wife works there part time. She's wrapping up her career, um, and going to retire early. And she'll be helping out in the store as well. So it's a lot more family dynamic kind of coming together, and um, that helps.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as we wrap up, I just have a couple more questions. I earlier in this interview you were talking about how much you were drinking when you started TSM, and I don't know if you would classify that as like severe alcohol use disorder. I heard you say, I was an alcoholic. Sometimes I hear people say that the Sinclair method can't work for severe alcohol use disorder. If you're a real alcoholic, this method can't work for you. What would you say to that, or the people that have that belief that this doesn't work for people who have severe alcohol use disorder?
I mean, everybody's different, but I mean, hogwash in a way. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make light of anybody's situation, because if you're watching me, you're desperate to get, to improve somehow. And I was drinking a ton in a very, very short period of time too. And a lot of times, I mean, I was a bourbon connoisseur, so a lot of this is, heavy duty cask strength stuff. I mean, 110 proof, that sort of thing. I mean, I could go through a bottle of that in a night. But, I mean, I drank a lot in a very, very short period of time. Excuse me. I mean, I've got a scar on my shin here from it's actually in the shape of a J from Jack Daniels, when I got up to, go to the bathroom at night and fell into an old coffee table that was near my bed. I fell one night, and I would go through these phases. I was drinking wine back then, but supplementing with vodka, in a back room. And I was back there on the phone with my brother. And I fell over and grabbed a dresser on the way down. It landed on top of me, and I broke a rib. I mean, I think you could call me a severe alcoholic at times, for sure. Um, and that's consistent. That was like, you know, obviously I'm breaking bones every day, but I mean, when I cut my leg, the guy put me on antibiotics and stuff, and I, wanted to check it like a week later, and it was getting infected and stuff. And he's like, you know, because the antibiotics weren't working, I was just continuing to drink. So, I mean, the only thing that didn't make me a hardcore classic, alcoholic, um, was that I wasn't day drinking, you know. But I mean, I knew I had to set some boundaries somehow. I still had to try to build the business. I mean, my life would have been a lot different. I mean, had I discovered this many years ago, I mean, it wasn't around. Um, I think it's awesome that people, get a chance. I mean, I don't think you could ever say it doesn't work for somebody with, severe alcohol abuse. Everybody just has to try. You have to give it a shot. You have to give it the best effort you can. And, every little bit is going to help, cut down a little bit on the hard alcohol and then a little bit more, maybe up to 75, you know. But I would say anybody who has a problem with alcohol should try this 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, worst case scenario, you try it and find it's not working, but it works for the majority of people, which is great to see. Of course, it's not going to work for everybody, but yeah. Okay. So I guess my final question for you is, what tips or information or final thoughts do you have to share with people who are watching this today, whether they're on the Sinclair method or they're considering it, or maybe they're feeling discouraged about their progress on the method? What would you like to share with them today?
Yeah. It's, I mean, you can use the old cliches like hang in there and stick with it, and it does work, and that's what we hear. You see on the Facebook page all the time, and I mean, definitely go to the Zoom meetings. If you're having difficulty, join up with what Katie's doing with her. You know, I forget what you call your, the Thrive community or whatever it is, but support from loved ones. Find somebody you can talk to. A friend, even if you're just connecting with somebody on Facebook who's a 3 year as well or something. You guys are always everybody can. If you see me out on the Sinclair Warrior page, I mean, you can PM me. Always ask questions, but it does work. I mean, I'm again, not 100% where I want to be, but I'm pretty much 95%. My last goal would just be to do some alcohol-free days and then just run that into a nice string, and then, hopefully a month here or there.
That's great. I know the cliches are so annoying, but they're so true, aren't they? Hang in there. Don't give up. Stay compliant. Like those are the classic things that really produce success for most people on the Sinclair method. I always tell people time is your ally with this method. Like you really need to give it time to work. So you're
Yeah, I
living
love
proof of that.
I always like, I'm very sympathetic to anybody who comes on that page, because everybody's in the same spot. Oh, I'm looking for help. And some of the people, it's like, it's funny in a way to watch, but the ones that are like, oh, I took now for the third time, and and wine tasted totally disgusting to me, and you kind of want to chime out there like doesn't really work that way, but again, I'm not. I'm out there to support people if they look like they need help. I don't post out that often, but really, it's kind of amusing sometimes to see the honeymoon phase, as I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. The honeymoon phase is really common, and sometimes people will see that initial drop or change and then it spikes back up and they freak out that it's not working, but it's pretty normal for the method. That's why we say it needs time to work. It took time to develop alcohol use disorder. It'll take time to break down that habit over many months. Well, thank you so much,
4 years.
Jason. Anything else you'd like to share with us today before we wrap up the call?
Yeah, just best of luck to anybody who's watching this video, with the method. And I seriously, sincerely hope it works for you and it makes a change in your life. It definitely did for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you so much for coming on to share your story today, and hope you have a great night. Congratulations
Yeah,
on
you
your
too. All
success.
right, thank you. Thank you for having me, Katie.
Bye.